My name is Lauren. I am 28 years old and I never thought I would see my father hit my mother. But there I was, sitting in a cold courtroom in Los Angeles, watching the man who raised me turn into someone I no longer recognized. My hands gripped a brown leather bag on my lap, filled with documents nobody knew I had. My heart pounded so hard I could hear it in my ears. Today was the day everything would change. Today, the truth would finally come out. Before I tell you what happened in that courtroom, I would love to know where you are watching from. Please hit the like button and subscribe, because what comes next will show you why silence is not always weakness. When I close my eyes, I can still see our old house in Portland, Oregon. I was 12 years old back then, and life felt safe. The house was small, painted a soft shade of green with my mother's rose garden blooming in the front yard every spring. My father, Richard, worked as a mechanical engineer for a small firm downtown. He was not rich, but he was steady, reliable, and kind. My mother, Diane, taught third grade at the local elementary school. She had this way of making everyone feel special, like they mattered. Every evening our family would gather in the living room. Dad would make popcorn in the big silver pot, the kind that you shake over the stove. The smell of butter would fill the whole house. We would pick a movie together, always taking turns choosing. Mom loved romantic comedies. Dad preferred action films. I usually went for animated movies, even though I was getting too old for them. On Saturday mornings, Dad would wake me up early, and we would ride our bikes to the farmer's market. He would buy fresh strawberries, and I would get a cinnamon roll from the bakery stand. We would ride home slowly, talking about everything and nothing. Those moments felt endless, like they would last forever. Mom was the heart of our home. She taught her students during the day, but she was always home before I got back from school. The kitchen would smell like something wonderful: baked chicken or apple pie or her famous pot roast. She would sit with me at the dining table and help me with my homework, patiently explaining fractions or grammar rules. She attended every parent-teacher conference, every school play, every choir concert. She never missed a single one. At night, after I finished my homework, Mom would brush my hair. She had this gentle way of running the brush through my tangles without hurting me. She would hum old songs, tunes I did not know the names of but recognized by heart. Sometimes she would sing softly, and her voice would make me feel warm and sleepy. I felt completely loved. Dad was different back then, too. He would come home from work tired but happy. He would wrap his arms around Mom from behind while she cooked dinner and kiss the top of her head. He called her my beautiful wife, and she would smile, that soft smile that made her eyes crinkle at the corners. On weekends, he would help with the dishes, joking around and flicking soap bubbles at me. We would laugh until our stomachs hurt. He taught me about honesty and responsibility. "Always keep your word, Lauren," he would say. "Your integrity is all you really have." Dad and I would spend hours in the garage together, fixing my bicycle or building small wooden projects. He showed me how to use a hammer, how to measure twice and cut once. He was patient, never frustrated when I made mistakes. "That's how we learn," he would tell me. I remember one particular evening when I was about 14. We were all playing Scrabble at the kitchen table. Dad made up a ridiculous word and insisted it was real. Mom challenged him and we looked it up in the dictionary. Of course he was wrong. He laughed so hard he nearly fell off his chair. Mom and I teased him about it for weeks. That memory feels like it belongs to a different family now. Everything started to shift when I was 16. Dad's small engineering company was bought out by a major corporation based in Los Angeles. They wanted to keep him on, but it meant relocating. They offered him a promotion and a salary that was 3 times what he had been making. It felt like a dream come true. We moved to Los Angeles that summer. The new house was enormous compared to our little green home in Portland. It had 4 bedrooms, a pool in the backyard, and was located in a neighborhood where every lawn looked like it belonged in a magazine. At first, we were all excited. Mom decorated the new house with care. I started at a new high school. Dad seemed energized by the challenge of his new position. But slowly, things began to change. Dad started working longer hours. 60 hours a week became 70. He would come home after 9 at night, eat dinner alone in his office, and go straight to bed. On weekends, he was on his phone constantly answering emails, taking calls. When Mom suggested we have a family movie night like we used to, he waved her off. "I have too much work, Diane. Maybe next week." Next week never came. I noticed he stopped asking Mom about her day. He stopped kissing her forehead in the mornings. He stopped laughing at her jokes. When she spoke, he would glance at his phone, barely listening. Mom tried to adjust. She kept cooking his favorite meals, kept the house perfect, kept smiling. But I could see the sadness creeping into her eyes. I thought it was just stress from the new job. I told myself it would get better once he settled in. I had no idea how wrong I was. 2 years after we moved to Los Angeles, Dad was promoted again. He became the regional director overseeing multiple teams across California. His salary jumped to over $300,000 a year. Suddenly, we were living in a way I had never imagined. Dad bought a new Mercedes, sleek and silver. He joined an exclusive golf club in Malibu, where membership alone cost $20,000 annually. He started wearing designer suits and expensive watches. But the money changed him in ways that had nothing to do with clothes or cars. He became obsessed with status, with appearances, with impressing people who did not really care about him. He started talking differently, using corporate jargon and name-dropping executives I had never heard of. When we went out to dinner, he would choose the most expensive restaurants and complain if the service was not perfect. The worst part was how he started treating Mom. One evening, Mom made her apple pie the same recipe she had been using since I was a child. She served it to Dad with a proud smile. He took one bite and pushed the plate away. "This is too plain, Diane. We can afford better desserts now. Maybe leave the baking to professionals." Mom's face fell. She did not say anything, just quietly took the pie back to the kitchen. I followed her and found her standing at the sink, staring out the window with tears rolling down her cheeks. I hugged her and she whispered, "I am fine, honey. Just tired." But she was not fine. None of us were. Dad started criticizing everything about Mom. Her clothes were not fashionable enough. Her hair was too simple. Her opinions were not sophisticated. When we attended company events, he would introduce her quickly and then steer the conversation away from her as if she was an embarrassment. I watched my mother shrink, becoming quieter and smaller, trying so hard to be what he wanted and never succeeding. One night at dinner, Mom tried to talk to Dad about our finances. She had always been careful with money, and she was worried about how much he was spending. "Richard, maybe we should save more. We do not need such expensive things." He looked at her like she was a child who did not understand basic math. "You do not understand business, Diane. Just focus on the house. Let me handle the money." "But I just think—" "What do you know?" he snapped. "You are just a teacher. I am making the real money here." The cruelty in his voice shocked me. Mom went silent, staring down at her plate. I wanted to scream at him, but I was too stunned to speak. It got worse. He forgot Mom's birthday one year because he had an important business meeting. When she gently reminded him the next day, he shrugged. "I will make it up to you later," he said. He never did. Dinners became silent affairs. Dad would sit at the head of the table scrolling through his phone. Mom would try to make conversation asking about his day, but he would answer in single words. "Fine. Busy. Nothing important." I started to dread coming home. The house that had once felt warm now felt cold and empty despite its size. When I was 20 years old and in my final year at UCLA, I came home for a weekend visit. Mom looked thinner, more tired. There were dark circles under her eyes. When I hugged her, I could feel her ribs. "Mom, are you eating?" I asked. "Of course, sweetheart. I am just busy with school and everything." But I knew she was lying. I could see it in the way she moved, in the sadness that never left her face. That night I heard Dad's phone buzzing around midnight. I was getting water from the kitchen when I saw him step out onto the back patio to take the call. Curious and worried, I crept closer to the glass door. His voice was low, almost tender, in a way I had not heard in years. I miss you too, he said. No, she does not suspect anything. I will see you Thursday. My stomach turned. I knew right then that he was cheating on Mom. The next morning I tried to hint at it, asking Mom if everything was okay between her and Dad. She smiled that sad, tired smile. Marriage is complicated, Lauren. We are fine. But we were not fine. And it would only get worse. When I was 26, Mom called me one Tuesday afternoon. I was at work sitting in my small cubicle at a marketing firm downtown. When I saw her name on my phone, I answered immediately. Her voice was shaking. Lauren, can you come over tonight? I need to talk to you. I drove to the house straight after work. Mom was sitting in the living room, her hands folded in her lap. Her eyes were red and swollen. I am leaving your father, she said quietly. I want a divorce. I sat down beside her, taking her hand. What happened? She pulled out her phone and showed me a string of text messages. They were between Dad and a woman named Stephanie. The messages were intimate, affectionate, full of plans for trips and dinners and weekends away. They had been going on for at least 3 years. I found these last week, Mom said, her voice breaking. I have been trying to decide what to do, but I cannot do this anymore, Lauren. I cannot keep pretending. You do not have to, I told her, hugging her tightly. You deserve so much better. A week later, Mom filed for divorce. Dad's response was immediate and vicious. He hired a lawyer, a man named Bradley Thompson, who had a reputation for being ruthless in divorce cases. When Mom told me about it, I felt a chill run down my spine. Dad was not going to make this easy. He was going to fight, and he was going to fight dirty. Bradley Thompson's office was located in Beverly Hills in a glass tower that screamed wealth and power. His retainer fee alone was $50,000. Dad did not hesitate to pay it. Thompson was known for winning, for making sure his clients walked away with everything, while their ex-spouses got as little as legally possible. He was exactly the kind of lawyer Dad wanted. Within 2 weeks, Thompson sent a letter to Mom's attorney outlining their position. The language was cold and clinical. It claimed that Mom had contributed nothing to the marriage financially, and therefore deserved only minimal support. It argued that Dad had built his wealth entirely through his own efforts, and that Mom had simply enjoyed the benefits without earning them. Reading that letter made me sick. It erased 25 years of Mom's love, sacrifice, and hard work. It pretended she had done nothing but sit around and spend money. It was a lie, and Dad knew it. But that was just the beginning. Dad started moving money. I did not realize it at first, but I began to notice things. One afternoon, I was visiting the house to pick up some of my old belongings. Dad was in his home office on the phone with someone. I heard him say, "Transfer $2 million to the account in the Caymans. Make sure there is no paper trail back to me." I froze outside the door, my heart racing. He was hiding money. He was moving assets so Mom would not be able to claim her fair share in the divorce. Over the next few weeks, I started paying closer attention. I noticed Dad had transferred ownership of his company stock to a friend named Marcus Webb. On paper, it looked like Dad no longer owned any shares. But I overheard a conversation where Dad told Marcus, "Just hold on to these until the divorce is done, then we will transfer them back." Dad also bought 3 expensive cars, a Porsche, a Range Rover, and a Tesla. But none of them were registered in his name. They were in the names of colleagues and friends, people who were helping him hide his wealth. Meanwhile, Thompson began a campaign to destroy Mom's credibility. He sent interrogatories, legal questionnaires, asking about every aspect of her life. He demanded receipts for every purchase she had made in the last 10 years. He questioned her about her teaching salary, insinuating that she was financially irresponsible. In court filings, he painted her as someone who had lived off Dad's success without contributing anything meaningful. The worst part was hearing Dad talk about Mom to other people. I attended a company event with him, hoping to understand his state of mind. At the golf course, surrounded by his colleagues, he laughed and joked. Someone asked him about the divorce. Dad sipped his whiskey and said casually, 25 years wasted on someone who never appreciated what I built. She had it easy. All she did was teach a few kids and cook dinner. Now she wants half of everything I worked for. It is ridiculous." The men around him nodded sympathetically. None of them knew the truth. None of them knew how Mom had sacrificed her own career ambitions to support Dad, how she had moved across the country for him, how she had raised me almost single-handedly while he worked late hours climbing the corporate ladder. I wanted to scream at him to tell everyone what a liar he was. But I stayed quiet. For now. Mom, meanwhile, was struggling. She could not afford a lawyer like Thompson. She hired a woman named Patricia Nguyen, a solo practitioner who charged reasonable rates and genuinely cared about her clients. But Ms. Nguyen did not have the resources or the aggressive tactics that Thompson had. She did her best, but she was outmatched. Mom had some evidence of Dad's affair. She had screenshots of the text messages, a few photos she had found on an old iPad, but she had no idea about the hidden assets. She did not know about the offshore accounts or the transferred stock or the cars registered under other names. Dad had always handled the finances, and Mom had trusted him. That trust was now being used against her. One evening, I sat with Mom in her new apartment. She had moved out of the house and was renting a small one-bedroom place in Culver City. It was modest but clean, with second-hand furniture and a view of a parking lot. She looked exhausted. "I do not know how to fight him, Lauren," she said. "He has all the money, all the power. I am just a schoolteacher. What chance do I have?" "You have the truth, Mom," I told her. But even as I said it, I knew the truth was not enough. Not in a courtroom where money and lawyers could twist facts into whatever story they wanted to tell. That night, I made a decision. I was going to find the evidence Mom needed. I was going to expose what Dad was doing. A few days later, Dad went on a business trip to San Francisco. He would be gone for 3 days. I still had a key to the house, so I let myself in late at night when I knew no one would be there. My hands were shaking as I unlocked the door to Dad's home office. Inside, everything was meticulously organized. His desk was massive, made of dark wood, with a leather chair and 2 large monitors. I sat down and turned on his old laptop, the one he had stopped using a year ago. I prayed he had not wiped it clean. He had not. The laptop booted up and I started searching through his files. It did not take long to find what I was looking for. There were folders labeled Financial Transfers, Offshore Accounts, and Asset Management. I opened them and started reading. My stomach twisted as I saw the extent of what he had done. He had moved over $2 million to a bank in the Cayman Islands. He had transferred company stock worth another $1.5 million to Marcus Webb with a side agreement to return them after the divorce. He had purchased 3 luxury vehicles and put them in other people's names. There were receipts for jewelry, expensive trips, and gifts, all for Stephanie. I connected a USB drive and started copying everything. It took over an hour. My heart pounded the entire time, terrified that someone would come home, that I would be caught. But no one came. When I finally finished, I had a complete record of Dad's financial deception. I also found emails between him and Stephanie going back 3 years. Some of them were explicit. Others were just painfully intimate, showing a side of Dad I had not seen in years, the kind, tender man he used to be, except now he was that person with someone else. I left the house just before dawn, the USB drive clutched in my hand like a lifeline. I knew what I had could change everything, but I had no idea I would need it so soon. The court date was set for a Thursday morning in late September. Mom had been dreading it for weeks. The night before, she barely slept. I stayed with her in her apartment, and I could hear her tossing and turning in the next room. At 7 in the morning, I made her coffee and toast, though she could barely eat. "What if I lose everything?" she whispered. "What if the judge believes Richard's lawyers? You are not going to lose," I said, though I was not entirely sure. "And even if things do not go perfectly, you have me. You will always have me." She squeezed my hand, tears welling in her eyes. We drove to the Los Angeles County Superior Court in near silence. The building was large and imposing, all concrete and glass. Inside, the hallways echoed with footsteps and hushed conversations. We took the elevator to the 4th floor where the family law courtrooms were located. Mom was wearing a navy blue suit she had bought at a discount store. It was simple and professional, but I could see her hands trembling as she clutched her purse. I was dressed in a white blouse and black slacks. In my hands, I carried a brown leather bag, the same one I had been carrying for years. Inside were the documents I had copied from Dad's computer, organized into folders and labeled clearly. I had not told Mom about them yet. I wanted to wait until the right moment. We entered the courtroom and took our seats at the table on the left side. Ms. Nguyen was already there reviewing her notes. She smiled at us reassuringly, but I could see the worry in her eyes. On the other side of the room, Dad sat with Bradley Thompson. Dad was wearing a charcoal gray Armani suit that probably cost more than Mom's monthly rent. His hair was perfectly styled. He looked confident, almost smug. When he glanced over at us, there was no warmth in his eyes, only cold disdain. Thompson leaned over and whispered something to him. Dad smirked. The bailiff called the court to order, and Judge Henderson entered. He was a man in his early 60s with graying hair and a stern expression. He took his seat at the bench and reviewed the case file in front of him. "This is the matter of Carter versus Carter," he said. "Dissolution of marriage. Let us proceed." Thompson stood up first. His voice was smooth and confident, the voice of someone who had done this 1,000 times before. "Your Honor, this is a straightforward case. My client, Richard Carter, has built a successful career through years of hard work and dedication. He has provided a comfortable life for his family. Mrs. Carter, while a lovely person, has not contributed financially to the household in any meaningful way. She has been a homemaker and a part-time teacher earning a modest salary. The assets in question were accumulated entirely through Mr. Carter's efforts, and we believe a fair division should reflect that reality." He spoke for 10 minutes, painting Dad as a self-made man, and Mom as someone who had simply enjoyed the fruits of his labor without planting any seeds of her own. When he finished, Ms. Nguyen stood up. Her voice was quieter, less polished, but sincere. "Your Honor, Mrs. Carter has been married to Mr. Carter for 25 years. During that time, she raised their daughter, maintained their home, and supported her husband's career in every way possible. She sacrificed her own professional ambitions to ensure that he could focus on his work without distraction. She deserves to be recognized for those contributions." Thompson interrupted. "Your Honor, with all due respect, cooking dinner and attending school events do not constitute a financial contribution. Mrs. Carter chose to work part-time. That was her decision." The judge nodded, making notes. Then Thompson began presenting financial documents. He showed tax returns, pay stubs, and account statements. Everything painted a picture of Dad as the sole earner, the one who had built their wealth while Mom had done little. Mom sat beside me, her shoulders hunched, tears streaming silently down her face. I reached over and squeezed her hand. Thompson then called Dad to the witness stand. Dad walked up, confidently placed his hand on the Bible, and swore to tell the truth. The irony was not lost on me. Thompson asked him a series of questions designed to make him look good. "Mr. Carter, can you describe your career trajectory?" "I started as a junior engineer and worked my way up over 20 years. I now manage multiple teams and oversee projects worth millions of dollars. It required long hours, constant learning, and a level of dedication that not everyone is willing to give." "And did your wife support your career?" Dad hesitated, then shrugged. "She was there, yes. But support is a strong word. She did not understand the pressures I was under. She wanted me to spend more time at home, but I was building something. I was building our future." Thompson nodded approvingly. "Can you describe your wife's contribution to your success?" Dad looked directly at Mom. His expression was cold, devoid of any affection or respect. "Honestly, there was none. I worked 70 hours a week while she just cooked dinner and watched TV. She never understood my ambition. If anything, she held me back. She wanted me to stay small, to stay comfortable. But I wanted more." Hearing those words felt like a punch to the gut. Mom let out a small sob. Ms. Nguyen put a hand on her shoulder. Thompson continued. "And now she is asking for half of everything you have built." "Yes," Dad said. And it is completely unfair. I gave her a good life. A beautiful home, financial security, everything she could want. The divorce was her choice. She should live with the consequences. The courtroom was silent. Judge Henderson looked thoughtful, his pen tapping against his notepad. Thompson smiled, satisfied. "No further questions, Your Honor." The judge called for a short recess. As people began to stand and stretch, Mom turned to me, her face pale and drawn. "I cannot do this, Lauren. I cannot sit here and listen to him destroy me." "You do not have to do this alone," I whispered. "Trust me." We walked out into the hallway to get some air. Mom stood by the window looking out at the city below. I stayed close to her, holding my brown leather bag tightly. Then I saw Dad. He was walking toward us, his expression arrogant and cold. Thompson was a few steps behind him, texting on his phone. Dad stopped in front of Mom. For a moment, I thought maybe he would apologize. Maybe he would show even a shred of the man he used to be. Instead, he sneered. Mom looked at him, her voice trembling. "Richard, why are you doing this? I loved you. I gave you everything." Dad laughed, a harsh, bitter sound. "Loved me. You were useless from day one, Diane." Mom's face crumpled. "I sacrificed everything for you and Lauren. I gave up my career. I moved across the country. Before she could finish, Dad's hand shot out. He slapped her hard across the face. The sound echoed through the hallway like a gunshot. Mom stumbled backward, her hand flying to her cheek. She hit the wall and slid down slightly, her eyes wide with shock and pain. "Useless!" Dad screamed. "That is all you have ever been, useless!" Time seemed to stop. Everyone in the hallway froze, staring at the scene unfolding before them. I could see the red mark spreading across Mom's cheek, could see the tears streaming down her face. My entire body went numb. Then, like a switch flipping, rage flooded through me. The courthouse security rushed over. Thompson grabbed Dad's arm, trying to pull him away. "Richard, not here. Not now." But Dad kept glaring at Mom, his face twisted with contempt. "You deserve nothing." I looked down at the brown leather bag in my hands. Inside were the documents, the evidence, the truth. I had been planning to give them to Ms. Nguyen privately to let her present them in a calm, organized manner. But after what I had just witnessed, I knew I could not wait any longer. Mom needed me now. We returned to the courtroom. Mom's cheek was still red, the handprint visible. She sat down heavily, her whole body shaking. I sat beside her, my jaw clenched so tightly it hurt. Dad walked in with Thompson, looking slightly rattled but still defiant. He avoided eye contact with anyone. Judge Henderson took his seat again, glancing around the room. His expression was hard to read. "Let us continue," he said. "Does anyone have anything further to present?" Ms. Nguyen looked at Mom, then at me. She seemed defeated, unsure of what else to say. She opened her mouth to speak, but I stood up before she could. "Your Honor," I said, my voice louder than I expected. "I have something." The entire courtroom turned to look at me. Judge Henderson raised his eyebrows. "And who are you?" "My name is Lauren Carter. I am the daughter. And I have evidence that this court needs to see." Thompson immediately stood up, his voice sharp. "Your Honor, this is highly irregular. The daughter is not a party to this case." "Sit down, counsel," Judge Henderson said calmly. "I will decide what is or is not relevant." He looked at me. "What kind of evidence, Miss Carter?" I stepped forward, my legs feeling shaky but my resolve solid. I placed the brown leather bag on the table in front of me and unzipped it. Inside were dozens of pages organized into folders and labeled clearly. "Your Honor," I said, pulling out the first folder. "My father has been hiding assets, and I have proof." A murmur went through the courtroom. Thompson's face went pale. Dad leaned forward, his eyes wide with shock and anger. "Where did you get those?" he hissed. I ignored him and turned to the judge. "May I approach the bench?" Judge Henderson nodded. I walked forward and handed him the folder. Ms. Nguyen stood up looking stunned. I gave her a copy as well, along with Thompson. Thompson flipped through the pages, his expression growing darker by the second. "What is this?" the judge asked. "This," I said, my voice steady now, "is a record of financial transactions my father made over the past 18 months. He transferred over $2 million to offshore accounts in the Cayman Islands. He moved company stock worth $1.5 million to a friend named Marcus Webb with a signed agreement to return the stock after the divorce is finalized. He purchased 3 luxury vehicles, a Porsche, a Range Rover, and a Tesla, and registered them in the names of colleagues to hide them from the court." I pulled out more pages. "These are bank statements showing the transfers. These are emails between my father and his accountant discussing how to hide assets. This is the side agreement with Marcus Webb, and these are the vehicle registration documents." The courtroom was completely silent. Judge Henderson read through the documents carefully, his face growing more severe with each page. I could see the muscles in his jaw tightening. Thompson tried to speak. "Your Honor, we were not aware of." "Save it, counsel," the judge said, his tone ice cold. He continued reading. I pulled out another folder. "This is evidence of my father's infidelity," I said. "Text messages between him and a woman named Stephanie Reynolds spanning 3 years. Photos of them together on trips. Receipts for jewelry and gifts he bought her, including a diamond necklace that cost $40,000. I placed the folder on the bench. Mom was crying quietly, but I could see something else in her eyes now. Hope. Finally, I pulled out the last folder. "And this," I said, my voice breaking slightly, "is evidence of emotional abuse. Emails my father sent to my mother calling her worthless, pathetic, and useless. Text messages threatening her, saying she would end up on the street if she went through with the divorce. And a recording I made of him verbally attacking her." I placed the small digital recorder on the bench and pressed play. Dad's voice filled the courtroom, cold and cruel. "You are nothing without me, Diane. A nobody. Remember that." When the recording ended, the silence was deafening. Judge Henderson looked at Dad with an expression of barely controlled anger. Dad was staring at me, his face red, his hands clenched into fists. "You went through my computer," he said, his voice rising. "That is illegal. You had no right." "Your Honor," Thompson interjected, trying to regain control. "These documents were obtained without consent. They should not be admissible." Judge Henderson held up a hand. "Counsel, I do not care how these documents were obtained. What I care about is that your client lied to this court. He committed perjury by failing to disclose significant assets. And from what I have seen here, he has been engaging in a pattern of financial manipulation and abuse." He turned his gaze to Dad, and the look he gave him could have frozen fire. "Mr. Carter, I have been on this bench for 30 years. I have seen a lot of dishonest people come through my courtroom, but this level of deception is appalling." Dad tried to speak. "Your Honor, I can explain." "No," Judge Henderson said firmly. "You cannot. There is no explanation that justifies what you have done here." I looked at Mom. She was staring at me with wide, tear-filled eyes. I gave her a small nod. Then I turned back to the judge. "Your Honor," I said, my voice trembling but strong. "My mother spent 25 years of her life supporting my father. She gave up her career opportunities to raise me. She moved across the country for him. She attended every business dinner, every corporate event, always smiling, always supportive. She cooked every meal. She took care of our home. She was there for every single moment of my childhood, while my father worked late hours building his career." I looked directly at Dad. "And this is how he repays her. By cheating on her. By hiding money. By treating her like she is worthless. And then just an hour ago, by slapping her in public and calling her useless." My voice broke on the last word. Tears streamed down my face, but I did not wipe them away. My mother deserves every penny that my father tried to hide. She earned it through years of love, sacrifice, and devotion. She deserves justice. I sat down, my whole body shaking. Mom reached over and grabbed my hand, squeezing it so tightly it hurt. Judge Henderson looked at the documents in front of him for a long moment. Then he looked up. I am going to take a 15-minute recess to review all of this evidence. When I return, I will issue my ruling. He stood and left the courtroom. The room erupted in whispers. Thompson was frantically flipping through the documents, his face growing paler by the second. Dad sat frozen, staring at the table in front of him. Mom turned to me, her eyes overflowing with tears. "Lauren," she whispered, "how did you—" "I could not let him get away with it, Mom," I said. "I could not let him destroy you." She pulled me into a hug, holding me tightly. We sat there together, waiting, hoping, praying. When Judge Henderson returned, the courtroom went silent. He sat down, adjusted his glasses, and looked directly at Dad. "Mr. Carter," he began, his voice cold and measured, "I have reviewed the evidence presented by your daughter, and I am shocked, quite frankly, at the depth of your dishonesty." Thompson tried one more time. "Your Honor, if I may." "You may not," Judge Henderson said sharply. "I have heard enough from you, counsel." He turned his attention back to Dad. "You came into this courtroom and lied under oath. You claimed you had no hidden assets, no undisclosed accounts, no financial deception. But the evidence shows otherwise. You transferred over $2 million offshore. You moved company stock to a third party with the intent to reclaim it later. You purchased expensive vehicles and hid them from this court. That is perjury, Mr. Carter. That is fraud." Dad opened his mouth to speak, but Judge Henderson held up a hand. "I am not finished. You also engaged in a long-term affair while still married, spending significant marital funds on your mistress. And perhaps most disturbingly, you physically assaulted your wife in the hallway of this courthouse less than an hour ago in front of multiple witnesses, including court security." He paused, letting the weight of his words settle over the room. "Here is my ruling. Mrs. Carter is awarded 55% of all marital assets, including the assets you attempted to hide. That includes the offshore accounts, the transferred stock, the vehicles, and any other property acquired during the marriage. I am also ordering you to reimburse Mrs. Carter for all legal fees she has incurred in this case. Additionally, you will be required to attend a court-mandated anger management program. And I am issuing a restraining order. You are not to come within 500 feet of Mrs. Carter at any time." The courtroom was silent except for the sound of Mom crying softly beside me. Judge Henderson continued. "Based on the evidence presented, Mrs. Carter is entitled to approximately $3,200,000. You have 60 days to liquidate the necessary assets and transfer the funds to her. Failure to comply will result in contempt of court charges and possible jail time." Dad stood up abruptly, his face red with rage. "This is unfair. She manipulated you, my daughter." "One more word, Mr. Carter, and I will hold you in contempt right now," Judge Henderson said. "Sit down." Dad stood there for a moment, trembling with anger, then slowly sat back down. Judge Henderson looked at me. "Miss Carter, what you did took tremendous courage. Your mother is lucky to have you." I nodded, unable to speak past the lump in my throat. The judge banged his gavel. "This court is adjourned." As people began to file out, Dad turned to look at me. His eyes were filled with fury and something else, something that looked almost like betrayal. "You turned against your own father," he said quietly. I stood up and looked him directly in the eye. "No, Dad. You turned against us first. You betrayed Mom when you cheated on her. You betrayed me when you treated her like garbage. I did not turn against you. I stood up for what was right." He stared at me for a long moment, then turned and walked out of the courtroom without another word. Thompson followed him, looking defeated and angry. When they were gone, Mom turned to me. She did not say anything at first, just pulled me into the tightest hug I had ever felt. Her shoulders shook as she cried, but this time it was different. This time she was crying tears of relief. "Thank you," she whispered into my hair. "Thank you, baby. Thank you so much." "You do not have to thank me, Mom," I said, my own tears falling freely. "You deserve this. You deserve so much more." Miss Nguyen came over and shook my hand. "That was incredible," she said. "You saved your mother's life today." "I just did what was right," I said. The three of us stood there in the empty courtroom for a few minutes, letting the reality of what had just happened sink in. Then Mom took my hand and we walked out together. Outside, the sun was shining. The air felt lighter, cleaner somehow. Mom stopped on the courthouse steps and looked up at the sky. She closed her eyes and took a deep breath. For the first time in years, she looked at peace. The first few months after the trial were hard. Change, even good change, is never easy. Mom and I found a small 2-bedroom apartment in Santa Monica, just a few blocks from the beach. It was nothing like the big house in Los Angeles, but it felt like home in a way that house never had. The walls were painted a soft cream color. The furniture was simple second-hand pieces we bought from thrift stores and online marketplaces. There was a tiny balcony where we could sit in the mornings and watch the sunrise over the ocean. Mom struggled at first. Years of emotional abuse do not disappear overnight. She would wake up in the middle of the night gasping for air, her heart racing from nightmares. I would hear her crying in the bathroom, trying to muffle the sound so I would not worry. Some days she would just sit on the couch staring at nothing, lost in her own thoughts. I stayed with her as much as I could. I took time off work to be there in those early weeks. We would cook dinner together, simple meals like spaghetti or grilled chicken. We would watch old movies, the ones we used to watch when I was a kid. We would talk for hours about everything and nothing, rebuilding the connection that had been strained by years of Dad's cruelty. Slowly, Mom started to heal. She joined a yoga class at a small studio near our apartment. At first, she was self-conscious, worried about being the oldest person there. But the instructor was kind and welcoming, and Mom found peace in the quiet practice. She started going 3 times a week, and I could see the change in her. She stood a little taller. She smiled a little more. She also made a new friend. Her name was Karen, a woman in her 50s who had lost her husband to cancer 2 years earlier. Karen was warm and funny with a loud laugh and an easy way of making people feel comfortable. She and Mom bonded over their shared experiences of starting over. They would meet for coffee every Saturday morning, and later they started taking long walks along the beach together. One morning, about 3 months after the trial, Mom came into the kitchen while I was making breakfast. She looked different. There was a lightness in her eyes that I had not seen in years. "I have been thinking," she said, pouring herself a cup of coffee. "I want to open a bakery." I looked at her in surprise. "A bakery?" She nodded, smiling. "I have always loved baking. It was one of the few things that made me happy when everything else felt so hard. And I am good at it. People used to tell me I should sell my pies and cakes. Maybe now is the time." "I think that is a wonderful idea," I said, grinning. She started small. She found a tiny storefront on Main Street in Santa Monica, just big enough for a counter, a kitchen in the back, and 6 small tables. The rent was affordable, and the location was perfect, close to the beach, and surrounded by shops and cafes. We spent 2 weeks cleaning and painting. We painted the walls a soft, buttery yellow and hung cheerful curtains in the windows. We bought second-hand tables and chairs and refinished them ourselves. Mom designed a simple sign that read, "Diane's Homemade Pies," in elegant script. The bakery opened on a sunny Saturday morning in early spring. Mom was nervous, pacing back and forth in the kitchen, adjusting trays of pies and checking the oven for the 10th time. "What if no one comes?" she said, wringing her hands. "They will come," I assured her. "Your pies are amazing." And they did come. By noon, there was a line out the door. People loved the apple pies, the blueberry tarts, the lemon meringue, the chocolate cream. Mom's face glowed as she handed out slices and chatted with customers. She had found her passion again, and it showed in every smile, every laugh, every perfectly baked crust. The bakery became a gathering place. Regular customers came in every week, sitting at the little tables and sipping coffee while they ate pie. Mom learned their names, their stories, their favorite flavors. She made the bakery feel like home, warm and welcoming and full of love. Within 4 months, the bakery was turning a profit. Within 6 months, Mom had hired 2 part-time employees to help with the rush. I helped her with the business side, managing the books, creating a simple website, handling social media. Watching her thrive was one of the greatest joys of my life. As for Dad, we heard bits and pieces through mutual acquaintances. He lost his job 6 months after the trial. The company found out about his financial misconduct and let him go. Stephanie, the woman he had been having an affair with, left him shortly after. Apparently, she was only interested in him when he had money and status. The last I heard, he was living in a small apartment somewhere in the valley, struggling to find work. He had destroyed his own life through greed and cruelty. But mostly I just felt relieved that he was no longer a part of ours. One evening, about a year after the trial, Mom and I were sitting on the balcony of our apartment. The sun was setting over the ocean, painting the sky in shades of pink and gold. Mom was holding a cup of tea, her legs tucked under her, looking peaceful. "Do you know what I have learned this year?" she said quietly. "What is that?" I asked. "That it is never too late to start over. I spent so many years thinking I was stuck that I had to accept the life I had. But I was wrong. I had the power to change things all along. I just needed to believe in myself." She looked at me, her eyes shining. "And I needed you. You gave me the courage to fight back. You saved me, Lauren." I shook my head. "You saved yourself, Mom. I just gave you the tools. You did the hard work." She reached over and took my hand. "We saved each other," she said softly. I thought about everything we had been through, the pain, the betrayal, the fear, but also the strength, the resilience, the love that held us together when everything else was falling apart. "Yeah," I said. "We did." I learned a lot that year. I learned that silence is not always strength. Sometimes you have to speak up even when it is terrifying, even when it means standing against someone you love. I learned that family is not just about blood. It is about respect, loyalty, and love. Dad was my father by blood, but he stopped being family the moment he chose cruelty over kindness. I learned that starting over is not a sign of failure. It is a sign of courage. Mom could have stayed in that marriage accepting the abuse and the disrespect. But she chose to leave to rebuild, to create a life that made her happy. That took more strength than staying ever would have. And I learned that justice is not always swift, but it is real. It took months of fear and pain to get to that courtroom. But in the end, the truth came out. Mom got what she deserved, not because of some miracle, but because we fought for it. One afternoon, I was helping Mom close up the bakery. We had just finished cleaning the kitchen and wiping down the tables. The smell of cinnamon and sugar still hung in the air. Mom was humming softly to herself as she counted the cash register. I looked at her and felt a wave of gratitude wash over me. She had been through so much, but she had come out the other side stronger and happier. "Mom," I said, "I am so proud of you." She looked up, surprised. "Why?" "Because you did not let him break you," I said. "You could have given up. You could have accepted the lies and the abuse. But you did not. You fought back. You rebuilt your life. You are amazing." She smiled, tears filling her eyes. "I could not have done it without you." "Yes, you could have," I said. "But I am glad I was here with you." She came over and hugged me tightly. "I love you, Lauren." "I love you too, Mom." As we locked up the bakery and walked home together, I thought about the brown leather bag I had carried into that courtroom. It was sitting in my closet now, empty except for a few old receipts. But it would always remind me of that day, the day I stood up and spoke the truth, the day I helped my mother reclaim her life. Sometimes the people who are supposed to love you the most can hurt you the deepest. But that does not mean you stop believing in love or justice. It just means you learn to fight for both. If you are watching this and going through something similar, I want you to know something. Your voice matters. Your truth matters. Do not wait for someone else to save you. Sometimes you have to be your own hero. I would love to hear from you. Have you ever had to stand up for someone you love even when it was scary? Have you ever had to make a difficult choice between loyalty and doing what is right? Please share your story in the comments below. Your experiences might help someone else who is going through a similar situation. And if this story resonated with you, please hit the like button and subscribe to this channel. Share this video with someone who might need to hear it. Sometimes knowing you are not alone can make all the difference. Thank you so much for watching. I hope this story reminded you that courage is not about being fearless. It is about doing the right thing even when you are afraid. Take care of yourself and remember you are stronger than you think.